Hi, my name is Robert Holden, and I'm an author with Hay House, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the inaugural Hay House World Summit, a gathering of thought leaders and teachers from some of the world's greatest spiritual and philosophical traditions that will touch the lives of millions of people on this planet. Now, one afternoon, on a sunny, bright autumn day in the year 2003, I met with my friend Marika Borg for a cup of coffee in Helsinki, Finland. Early that day, I had attended a ceremony at which I received my doctorate. So it was a day of celebration for previous work done, but also, as it turned out, it was a day of new beginnings and new adventures. As I sat down with my friend Marika, she started to tell me about something called the Enneagram. Now, to begin with, I was a little bit interested, but the more she told me, the more interested I became. Shortly after our conversation, I booked myself on a 3-day course called Wisdom of the Enneagram, run by Don Riso and Russ Hudson. Don and Russ headed up an organization called the Enneagram Institute. They've authored many books on the Enneagram, including Wisdom of the Enneagram and also Personality Types, which, by the way, I would put definitely in my top 5 books of all time. It's one of the most compelling reads of my life. Over the years, Don and Russ became my teachers and mentors as I embarked upon a wonderful journey of self-awareness, healing, growth, and liberation with the Enneagram. Today, the Enneagram is a source of constant inspiration to me in my life and work. I teach workshops on the Enneagram. In my coaching practice, when I coach people one-on-one, I often use the Enneagram. I use it in my writing, and most importantly, I use it every day in my life. My whole family are conversant with the Enneagram, and in short, we love the Enneagram. So on that note, I'm very pleased to be joined in conversation over the next hour by Russ Hudson. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you, Robert.
Russ, this is so much fun that we get a chance to have an hour together to explore the Enneagram. And I wondered if I could just begin by asking you, what do you remember of your first introduction to the Enneagram?
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's a bit of a two-parter. I originally learned about the Enneagram through the work of the Armenian, Greek, Russian teacher George Gurdjieff. And I read about it, oh my goodness, back in the 1970s. I was still a late teenager. And I read a book called In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky, and it had a tremendous impact on me. But in that book and in the work of Gurdjieff, they spoke about the Enneagram primarily as a symbol that represented the uniting of different processes, psychological processes, cosmic processes, sort of an all-purpose mandala. I was very interested in it, but it was actually many years later that I encountered it in the way that most people know about it nowadays as a typology. First through an article that a man named Charles Tart gathered about the work of a man named Oscar Ichazo. And that was an eye-opening thing, but it didn't really captivate me until I encountered Don Riso's first book, Personality Types, which came out in 1987. Started reading, and it just flabbergasted me, some of the observations that Don had put together about not just the idea of psychological type, but that type could develop, that there was a track of development that was different for different sorts of people. That was such a captivating idea. It seemed so true, and I got very enthused about it from right then and there.
So how would you best describe the Enneagram, Russ? I mean, even the name, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But as I say, How would you best describe the Enneagram? What is it?
But the version of it that most people are aware of and that I've written the books about has to do specifically with using that very ancient way of looking at things and applying to human personality, to the human psyche, to the different kind of vectors of human consciousness, and how they're all part of each individual. We have it breaks it into 9 areas or 9 vectors, 9 areas of concern that human beings have. And everybody's got all 9 in some fashion. But the key idea of the Enneagram is that one of them is our forte. One of them is our greatest gift. One of them is gives us information about what our, if I might say, what our soul's purpose would be about in our time on Earth. And but on the other hand, when we overuse that talent or capacity, or we let some of the other parts of ourselves drop out too much, it tends to become unbalanced and create various kind of problems in our lives. The other thing I'd say about it is that the Enneagram, at least in its original presentation, which is what I prefer, has to do with presence, has to do with being, really being and living and loving in the moment, which is, the only moment we have. And it helps us see the capacities that support us in living in the moment, but it also helps us see what we all do instead of living in the moment. I mean, if being in the moment is so great, why do we do something else? Well, the Enneagram gives us some answers for why we don't always live in the moment, which is pretty useful information, I think, for most people.
And so, Russ, from reading about the Enneagram in the Quest bookstore, and I'm sure, just doing a bit more study, how did you first begin to practice with the Enneagram and have it somehow make a difference to your day?
I had already studied meditation by that point, and I already had gotten interested in the idea of being present. The Enneagram work, both from the Gurdjieff version and from the personality version, really emphasized that we have 3 fundamental intelligences at work in us: our body-based or kinesthetic intelligence, our heart-based or emotional intelligence, and our head-based or cognitive intelligence, but that we don't occupy those equally. So one thing that it taught me is that my particular personality type tends to be not so strong in body or kinesthetic awareness. So I made it a priority to keep my attention focused on whatever kinesthetic experiences were happening. Just simple things, sensing my feet as I walked around, being aware of the warmth of my body, breathing, things like that. The other thing was that I began to see, also studying my type, that along similar lines, I tend not to, or to resist really feeling contactful. My particular Enneagram type tends to be very cerebral, intellectual. We'll probably say something about that a bit later. But I saw how I was in a constant habit of breaking contact with the felt sense of my experience, and that whenever I did that, I became less effective as a human being, less in contact with love, less aware of the bigger picture that was happening in any given moment, but that it felt sort of normal to not be in contact. I was habituated to it. So I began to do different practices through breath, sensation, movement, and so forth to develop that part of myself.
And then, Russ, when did you first meet Don? Because there you were, reading about him and enjoying his material, and then at some point you obviously had this opportunity to meet him. How did you first meet?
Well, that's actually a pretty funny story. I noticed on the last, or really on the inside of the back cover of the book, there was tiny little line of print at the bottom of the page mentioning that Don Richard Riso had a consulting company in New York City. And I thought, well, I live in New York City. I could find this fellow. But there was no number, no address, nothing like that listed. Well, in those days, we didn't have the internet around. So I did what you did then. I called directory assistance and went to find, was there a listing for Enneagram personality types? And sure enough, there was. So I gave them a call, and this deep baritone voice that I came to recognize answered, and it was Don. And I told him I'd like to just chat. And he said, "Well, I don't know about that, but I'll give you a consult if you like." So I said, "Okay." And I met him at the American Museum of Natural History. He didn't have an office yet in those days, he was acquiring one. Um, and we had an amazing long conversation. We had planned to have an hour-long talk, and it actually went like 4 hours.
A sign of things to come, by the way.
Well, yeah, we both had that sense of fate that you sometimes have when you meet someone where you kind of know, oh, this person's going to be in my life. And we had this marvelous conversation. The thing that I really remember was that he was very knowledgeable about the function of these personality styles that he had been studying, but he was also very open to learning about things because I was bringing this background from the Gurdjieff work and my meditation background, and he was equally interested to learn about that. So we formed a friendship, and it was a few years after that that I actually was letting him know that I was looking for a new job, and he contacted me, said, "How about working with me?" So it sort of came about sort of casually. I didn't really have any ambition to get into this as a profession or a job. I just thought it was interesting. And Don and I would have these phone conversations, I don't know, every 2 or 3 months. And but they were always interesting in exploring these things. And it was actually it was because of those phone conversations I thought it would be fun to work with them, and so I did.
And, I think my experience of the two of you is that, you just had this fabulous friendship born from, I think, a sense of shared purpose. And as you say, a delight and an appetite for inquiry, for truth, realization. I think I was trying to sort of count it up in my mind, Russ, but I think I've probably sat in on over 50 days worth of events that you and Don have done together. And
Wow.
yeah, and it's, and it was, I just feel I have benefited so much from, that your profound friendship with each other. And to your point, I would watch you both teaching together and learning from each other at the same time that you were teaching the rest of us. And I think, to have that demonstration, of an alive inquiry is such a wonderful thing to see. And also, I think, in a way, that's what's so wonderful about the Enneagram is that you really, there's this capacity for just like an unlimited experience of awareness, liberation, realization of who we most are. Coming right up to date, I mean, I guess we should, just acknowledge as well that Don recently passed away, and I know that there is going to be a memorial service for him shortly, and even as we speak, I can just feel his presence, Russ, and just this huge gratitude for a man who contributed so much to the field of spirituality, but also in particular to the Enneagram.
Yeah, I think anyone interested in the Enneagram, we all owe him quite a debt. There were other people working with the Enneagram and doing various things, some of them quite brilliant. But I just really, it's a wonder to me how Don labored away for so many years and persisted in studying this when there wasn't a lot of encouragement for him, I could say, from his family or friends. And just a few people seemed to grasp what he was trying to do. And but he stuck with it until Personality Types came out, and it was really a life-changing book for a lot of people.
Yeah, me too.
Including me.
Definitely for me. Yeah. Well, look, let's explore the Enneagram together. Let's investigate it just for a little while. And maybe what we could do is to take a look at the Enneagram of types. So we'll go through the 9 types, the 9 personality types of the Enneagram, but also we'll take a look at another version, as you say, of the Enneagram, which is this idea of the points of the Enneagram. Could you perhaps maybe just firstly describe these two types of Enneagram, the Enneagram of types and the Enneagram of points?
Well, the Enneagram of types is kind of more obvious or easy to grasp, but it's a description of 9 styles of being a person, if you will, 9 sort of areas of concern or focus, and we can really describe them as psychological types. There are other typing systems out there. There's Briggs system or classical ones like astrology and so forth. Enneagram type is not determined by your birth date or the letters in your name or anything of the sort. It's found through a process of introspection, but there are 9 types or 9 styles. They're 9 ego patterns, if you will, and they're related to 9 kind of fundamental areas of the human soul or the human psyche. So people who learn the Enneagram want to find out about what their type is because it gives us clues about what our greatest capacities are, but also some of the challenges that we will face in the journey of awakening. It makes them very explicit, and as I was saying earlier, gives us some clues about the sort of practices that will be the most effective at balancing us. So that type is again, type of person. Point is more looking at how each of these also represent universal qualities of human experience, universal qualities of consciousness even. And so when I talk about this, I try always to keep a balance of, yes, we're talking about particular types of people, and that's very significant, but also we're talking about how that particular energy or quality plays out in everyone, whether or not that is their type. I might not be an Enneagram 8 or an Enneagram 9, but I still have the qualities of 8 and 9 in me. I have a certain relationship with those energies. And as we describe the energies, I think people will definitely get the sense of that distinction or what we mean by that.
Great. Well, let's dive in. Where would you like to begin? What type should we start with?
Well, traditionally, people sometimes start with 1 because, it's 1 through 9. But I like to start with the 8 often, simply because the types are arranged on a circle. And the first 3, the 8, the 9, and the 1, all represent types that are related to the capacities, the opportunities, and the difficulties of the embodiment of the body intelligence, the kinesthetic intelligence. So it's rather than looking at them all as a kind of a grab bag of traits, there are meaningful clusters, meaningful structures to the way the types are sequenced. So, yeah, 8's a good place to start, I think.
Let's do that. So could you then give us a flavor of type 8? Maybe I could just ask you, how would you know if your personality is a type 8 personality?
Well, another reason 8s are great to start with is because they're very definite. They're very definite people. They're people who generally know what they want and what they don't want. They're strong in life. They're powerful people. They're not always confident in themselves, but confident in their capacities. They're people who are bold, who take risks, who take initiatives, actually like doing that. Call type 8 the challenger. And I actually enjoy challenges. I enjoy the opportunity to test my mettle. And people do that, of course, in different areas of life. I think that 8s positively are natural leaders. They're because of this confidence. They're very decisive people. They're quite flabbergasted that people have difficulty making decisions. It comes quite easy to them. But also, on the difficult side of it, they're people who have a lot of problems with anger, with getting upset and angry and expressing their anger in ways that other people might find too much or even become afraid of. What else can we tell you? There are people who, again, have this gut intelligence. So they care about aliveness and realness and directness. And you can see why those qualities would be important for someone in being a leader or starting a business or things of that nature.
They're often a very big personality. And I know many of us struggle with the fear that I'm not enough. I often think at type 8, the personality's fear is often I'm too much. I'm too big. And my great challenge in my life is to know how to show up in a way that is appropriate, where I can be fully myself, but I'm not going to dominate the situation I'm in.
Exactly. And what I'm always trying to guide the eights toward is it's not necessary to edit yourself in a harsh way. Actually, people like that big energy when it's tempered by also expressing their caring, their tenderness, which they have in abundance. But when they themselves are scared, they kind of put that into hiding and just give people the big energy.
Yeah.
But when they've got the two together, there's such an incredible combination.
In my experience, when I'm coaching people in leadership positions, so often these leaders, their personality is a 0.8 personality.
Well, again, they don't mind starting things, and they don't mind taking risks, and they also, I very much respect that eights have a strong sense of honor, and they stand by their decisions. And if things don't go well, they will take responsibility for that. Okay, that was my decision. It didn't go well. I'll fix it, right? And that wins them points with other people usually.
So somebody who has a type 8 personality, how might the Enneagram help them in their day-to-day life?
Well, one way is what we were already mentioning. It helps them find a balance between their bigness of instinctual energy and the actual goodness of their hearts. I think most eights have a lot of heart, a lot of kindness, but if they've had difficulties in life, if they've been hurt or disappointed, and frankly, who hasn't, they also can use that big energy to protect themselves, to hide a bit behind it. And so a lot of their work entails bringing their heart out more, finding a real balance and blending between their big, powerful, beautiful, instinctual energy and the kindness of their heart. Sometimes we could get the idea that these would be opposites, that one is strong and one is weak. But I think eights are on a journey of learning how that kindness is absolutely part of their strength, what makes them powerful.
And then how about a meditation at 0.8, something that we could all relate to and benefit from?
Well, I think the meditation of 8 is always to bring into awareness our total aliveness, our immediacy, the how incredible it is to feel the aliveness and realness and power of the moment. As I like to tell my students, reality is not pastel. Spirit is not pastel. It's in vivid, beautiful colors. It's making intense, wonderful music. And we don't have to strive for intensity if we just relax and we're here and embrace the beautiful fullness of each moment. That's kind of honoring the 8 in ourselves.
Beautiful, beautiful. And it is so true, when we know people in our lives who have this type 8 personality, I think one of the great joys of knowing these people is their aliveness, and
Yes.
how their aliveness is so infectious that it just brings you more into your own life too.
Yes, absolutely. I think each type reminds us of that part of ourselves. It's like each one is, even spiritual teachers are often transmitting primarily the quality of being or the quality of soul of their particular type. It may not even be egoic anymore, but it's still that particular flavor.
Is there a personality in history or in society that you could point to where you could say, yeah, that's a good example of a 0.8 type 8 personality?
Oh, there are so many of them. It depends on whether we're talking about the more conscious side of it or the more garden variety personality side of it. But there's a lot of people in the news who are eights. Um, and there's a lot of variety in them. I think historic figures on the high side of eight, Gurdjieff, who brought the Enneagram, was most likely an Enneagram eight. The Reverend Martin Luther King, we think, was an Enneagram eight, who was very courageous and a bigger than life kind of character. Um, Gee whiz, there's so many of them. There's a lot of major. Well, another one on the sort of other side of it is the original James Bond, Sean Connery. Is a kind of an eight. But you can see in all of them this kind of robust energy. That's the thing.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Well, let's go to type 9. How
Yes.
would somebody know if they have a personality that is a type 9 personality?
Well, type 9 is also instinctual in orientation, but nines are not about that big, powerful, immediate energy. Nines are about grounding energy and about ease and comfort and putting other people at their ease. So this is the very easygoing kind of person. Nines can be very hard workers. They can be quite accomplished, doing a lot of things, but they really value living as much as possible stress-free lives, taking it easy. Excuse me. They can be extremely creative and involved in all sorts of things, from politics to music to acting to corporate boards. But the thing is, they like having an influence that helps people relax, come together. They value wholeness and harmony and agreement. They tend to the classic thing about nines is they have difficulty with conflicts. Conflicts and aggression they find extremely unpleasant. I don't think most people like that, but nines of all types kind of withdraw themselves from anything that seems too aggressive, conflictual, nasty to them that way. They also have this incredible ability to withdraw their attention without withdrawing physically. In other words, the kind of person who can still be there at the meeting, but they don't like what's going on, and they've slipped out the back door of their mind. And as children, they learned how to do this to deal with things that were scary or threatening, and it's a wonderful little defense. However, as an adult, we want to be aware of that tendency and to use it consciously rather than as a kind of a default setting, and that default setting becomes their problem. It becomes hard to feel engaged, involved, actively participating, even in my own life.
This raises, I think, an interesting insight in the Enneagram, which is that when you're really present, your greatest strength, for instance, at point 9 can be to be truly present. But then
Yes.
to be involved in life and in other people's lives. But when we aren't so present and in contact with ourselves, then actually here at point 9, the challenge is that we do, as you say, withdraw, and we almost leave ourselves alone and leave life alone. We almost withdraw so well that we lose contact with life.
Exactly. And it's become such a dilemma for people on the spiritual path. I think a lot of us, for instance, learn meditation to sort of get a little more ease in our life, to be a little less caught up in anxiety and suffering and the various distresses of life. And who can blame us, right? The 9 in us represents that wish. But you see, when we're actually grounded in the moment, we can participate with that kind of grounding, powerful 9 energy. I call it's the energy of being able to be with what's happening. But when we're not particularly present, we're not particularly grounded, we tend to soothe ourselves by checking out in various ways. And we can even use spiritual techniques to do that, to use them to check out as opposed to really be in our lives in a dynamic way.
So at point 9, we can be this peaceful, easygoing person, so long as we don't watch the news, so long as we only meditate, so long as we don't surround ourselves with negative people. That's the lower side of it, you're saying. But then on another side, there's this awareness that there's a piece in all of us that is beautifully untouched by this world, and therefore we can afford to show up fully in the world and be a true peacemaker. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. The healthy 9 is a peacemaker by how I live, how I express myself, how I am there in a beautiful way, really being with other people. I help bring peace. I help bring harmony. I can do that through my insights as a therapist, or the paintings that I make, or the way I work with plants and animals. 9s are out doing all sorts of things like that. But that's quite different than making peace by shutting the world out, which ends up not bringing me peace in the long run.
You know, when my 2 children, Bo and Christopher, were born, within hours of them both being born, we gave them a cranial sacral massage session, which was given by somebody who has a personality at 0.9. And it felt so lovely to have somebody who has such a peaceful presence welcoming our children into the world, almost like telling us that, look, heaven is here in the world too. It can be here if you remember to stay in contact with your true nature. You're going to find the peace of heaven in this world. You don't have to nip off. You don't have to escape. You can be here because the peace of heaven has come with you.
What a beautiful way to express it. And I never knew that about about your children. That's really wonderful. But yes, it is like that. It's finding out that we don't have to leave ourselves. We don't have to leave our life to feel that beautiful inner peace. It's really the idea of being in the world but not of it. I think when that the higher 9 is absolutely that. The fixated or the troubled version of 9 is being of the world but not in it, completely concerned with worldly matters but not really here. And that creates difficulties also because people notice this. They notice that, well, here you are, and we're supposedly talking about our relationship, but it doesn't seem like you're really here with me. And then people get upset with the 9s, which is scarier, and it gives them more motive to stay hidden away.
So how about a meditation at 0.9, something that we could all relate to here?
Yes, I think for 0.9, it's anything that helps us be at home in ourself. And so this could be dynamic. I think things like Tai Chi, meditation practice that have some movement, slow, graceful movement, or a sitting practice. Traditional seated meditation is very related to the 9 sensibility, but that whatever helps us feel landed in ourselves, at home in our own skin, at home in our world, is going to support the inner 9 in us. Whatever helps us feel more of a wholeness and unity, both as ourselves, but also with with our environment. That's going to be helpful.
Beautiful, thank you. All right, so let's go to the last type of the instincts, type 1.
Yes.
Let's talk about type 1. How might you know if your personality is a type 1 personality?
Well, if you're a type 1, you are an idealistic person. You are a person of very high standards, and you know that about yourself. And in a sense, you know that you keep higher standards about yourself than most people do. And there's a sense of wanting to live up to things. There's a sense of feeling that I have a mission in life. Life has its fun and it has its creativity, it has its games, but you know what? We're here for a purpose. It's very important that we live in integrity with that purpose. So people for whom integrity is such a big thing. Now, everybody cares about integrity to some degree, but this is the central thing for ones. Walking my talk, doing a fantastic job at what I do, but also maintaining a high level of ethics, a high level of moral conduct. Uh, Most ones I know just would have a very difficult time fibbing in any sense. Doesn't mean they never do it, but it's hard for them. Uh, the other side of it, though, is that ones, when they get into their personality structures more and more away from their presence and their gift, they tend to get very stuck, kind of rigid, kind of hard on themselves, demanding on themselves, too strict, really, for themselves. And when they're like that, they tend to be a bit impatient with others, a bit frustrated with the world and with themselves. It's not much fun when they're like that. What is wonderful, though, is that at any moment, as a one, just take a breath, reconnect with myself a bit, and that beautiful and natural sense of nobility and goodness and integrity is always right there. It's not hard for me as a one.
When I think of the people in my life who have a type 1 personality, there is something almost noble about these people, you know. They
Yes.
do, as you say, have such a great sense of integrity, and when that's relaxed and integrated in them, it's just such a blessing to have somebody like that in your life. But as you say, when they lose contact with themselves, somehow the moral code, which instead of being benevolent now seems to be judgmental, and there's this sense that they're judging themselves too hard. They're putting a lot of pressure on themselves, and that
Yes.
somehow they're telling themselves, I'm just not good enough for what I'm here to do.
Right. And nothing ever seems to meet the standard. I used to always think ones are a bit like pole vaulting, that as soon as you can make it over the bar, you raise the bar. But that would be all right if I could make it. But it's like they're people who maybe give too much power to their own inner critic, their own superego, as Freud called it.
Mm.
And when they do that, that inner critic plays mean tricks, and it kind of always keeps the bar a bit above what I can actually jump over, which gets me very testy, to say the least. And as we said, very hard on myself, even to the point of getting depressed sometimes. We keep criticizing ourselves that much, we're not going to feel very good. Um, the other side of it, though, is that I think ones have such a clean form of generosity. They really are for other people. They really want fairness and goodness and justice in the world, on whatever level they concern themselves with. And generally speaking, people really admire and respect their integrity.
So what would be a way in which the Enneagram could help somebody with a type 1 personality?
Well, the people who are, it's always interesting that what the type needs and what the rest of us needs is a little bit different, which is a good point that you ask it this way. Uh, the type one person needs to love their spontaneity more, needs to embrace the child in them a little bit more, that wants to play and express and be. And I find ones benefit greatly by creativity, by doing things a little bit out of the box, by getting out of their routines, visiting something they haven't visited, going on a walk. I think they also benefit from learning to recognize their inner critic and the way it says very mean things to them and the way it attacks them, and to learn to not give so much of my energy, so much of my attention to those attacks. To recognize them for what they are opens up a lot of space and compassion, which is actually one of their great gifts when they um, get that inner critic from running the show, stop it from running the show, really.
And then how about a practical exercise for point one, something that we could all benefit from?
The point one for all of us is to recognize our own goodness. I think it's very hard for any ego to think of itself really as good, but to recognize an organic goodness in the way that you know it's the real thing and not just some sort of story you're telling yourself, is that when we really feel the true goodness in ourselves, we tend to see it in everyone else around us too. We might even see it more than they see it themselves. And we're aware of a basic goodness in the world. Um, I would also suggest that as we sit or practice, that our relationship to our spine, our relationship to our vertical integration, you could say, makes it easier to feel the kind of physical part of that goodness, the actual embodiment of that integrity, which doesn't mean, shape up, good posture. That's the ego again, trying to force it. But there's a kind of a natural and relaxed vertical expression, vertical integrity when I'm connected with this goodness, and the two things tend to support one another.
Wonderful. Thank you, Russ. So let's move along to another triad, 3 types in the Enneagram, beginning with point 2.
Yes. Well, here we're in the heart realm. And so this is a different set of issues, but they have to do with the real qualities of the heart versus the way that our ego or personality tries to get the sense of being lovable or valuable or interesting. The 2 is the type most focused on personal relationships and love and connection and contact between people. Again, everyone wants that to some degree, but 2s really go out of their way to make connection with people. They are naturally generous. They like to, it's no pressure for them to be there for other people. They like to be there for other people. They like to support other people, help other people, give gifts to other people, help people see how great they are. There's just an endless sort of effulgence of kindness and support that comes from 2s when they're really in their own power. The downside of them, though, is not exactly the opposite of that, but it's that they continue trying to do all that without really looking after themselves in any real or viable way. They become more and more what psychology has come to call codependent, in the sense of looking after everyone else but myself. When that happens for long periods of time, I get so used to that, I don't even know what I want or need. It tends to come out in subconscious ways, and it tends to also cause me to not give others what they really want or need. I end up giving others or supporting others in ways that are actually coming from what I subconsciously want or need. And of course, that's not nearly as effective.
The type 2 is sometimes referred to as the helper. So, and it's common to find people with a type 2 personality expressing that desire to help somehow, so they may show up in a role in their relationships or in their work as somebody who is serving, who is committed to some cause of giving.
Exactly. And again, positively, this is such a wonderful friend. I mean, who would not like a person like this in their life? But when I'm overdoing it and not really respecting myself, I tend to have issues with boundaries. My own, first of all, because I'm doing things for other people when I actually need to be doing things for myself. I've seen people get in trouble with that in offices, for example, where I'm helping the other person at the desk over there. I'm helping this lady get a report done, but in doing that, I haven't got my own work done. Another way that this can create problems with boundaries is that I start not really respecting other people's boundaries. I think that I want to help them, and the poor thing doesn't realize that they really need my help, but then I go in and do things that people sometimes don't want. That's getting into the problematic areas. But I would say that everything pivots for the 2 on their genuine self-awareness, and particularly on the self-awareness of their own vulnerabilities and needs. It's like, as a 2, that generosity is such a beautiful gift, but I start to cast myself almost as an angel on the earth. And when I do that, I forget to take care of my own human self. And that becomes my downfall if I'm not aware of it.
So the Enneagram at point 2, and for people who have a personality at type 2, can be in some ways like a mirror where you're being asked to to remember to look at yourself and to include yourself in your life's journey. Your joy is to help, but don't leave yourself out of your own life.
Exactly. Couldn't have put it
Okay.
more concisely. That's it in a nutshell.
How about a practical exercise for all of us at point 2?
Well, I think it's hard for everyone to receive, and the 2 shows us that. And so, of course, most of us do like giving, and we feel great when we give, but it's a powerful practice to notice, can we receive cleanly or clearly? Obviously, from other human beings, it's hard to receive even from our pets sometimes. Our dog is coming up to give us some kindness, and we feel embarrassed or distracted. People give us a compliment. We don't know what to do. Someone gets us a gift, and we're thinking, what am I going to get for them? But to just be relaxed and receive, I think, really opens something in our hearts. And certainly, if we're talking about the metaphysical or the spiritual dimensions of it, to receive from God, to receive from life, is a practice that needs constant revisiting.
I love how the meditations for the points support each other. So, for instance, here we're looking at receiving, and if we were to go back to point 8 and just commit to being fully alive, that would help us to be more receptive. At point 9, if we were just to be really in our lives and to be present in our lives, that would help us to be receptive. At type 1, point 1, if we were to recognize our own goodness, we would feel worthy enough to let ourselves receive. So somehow there's an integration here, isn't there, which is just beautiful.
Yeah, as you follow the track around, there's just a way that they bleed into one another, and it is a kind of a little journey as we go around the circle, or a big journey.
Let's go to type 3 on the
Yes.
Enneagram, which I have a bit of a personal interest in.
Yes.
So let's talk about point 3.
Well, point 3 is really about how spirit manifests as a human being and living a human life and doing things as a human being. So 3s, even on the personality level, tend to be doers, tend to be people who like to accomplish things, people who, if we get too carried away with it, life becomes a succession of, checking off the tasks. You might even have a checklist, but it's people who love to get things done, to accomplish things, and often become very successful as a result, because there is this drive to do, to accomplish, and to do a fine job. There are people who value competency and effectiveness and efficiency. However, the problem here is that when I overdo all that, I get out of balance. I get so efficient and effective at getting things done, I sort of don't take myself along for the ride. And in an odd parallel with type 9, there's a way that I kind of leave. I become this guy or this gal who's going around getting all these things done, but I'm not really enjoying it because I'm not here in the midst of the doing. It's like food becomes less important than getting the job done. And when that happens, there's a kind of inner detachment that occurs that leaves me feeling a lot more empty than someone who's done all that I've done ought to be feeling. That makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I can tell you personally, that was one of the great experiences for me in looking at the Enneagram. And for me, my personality is a type 3 personality. In a way, it was to look again at the whole nature of work and to really try to get clearer about, well, what is the real work of my life? And it was to see that actually the real work of my life isn't just my job. It isn't just the to-do list. It is about, as you say, like just being a full human being on this planet and remembering to bring my heart into everyday life and to see that as the great achievement, if you like, of life, is that I'm actually living my life rather than working at it and working at something to the point where actually I'm too busy for my life almost.
Yes, and that's a common trap that threes can get into, that getting too busy. And I think I like the way you put it, because it really is, when back in the Gurdjieff tradition, the process of development is called the work, but it's the work of contacting ourselves, the work of bringing into full realization our consciousness, our being, our true heart. I think the other big lesson of the threes is just the thing that we are tend in the modern world, and probably historically too, we're all taught that if we do certain kinds of tasks, if we get certain things done, if we have certain kinds of success, that's going to make us feel good about ourselves. But we see the lives of people who are very accomplished, and they don't always feel so good about themselves. So what we might want to learn here is that what brings the satisfaction is not necessarily in the nature of the task, but it's in what we bring to the task. Like any job that we do with presence and heart and connection, we tend to enjoy. You could be making soup, or creating a budget for your company, or you could be playing the guitar, or you could be walking the dog, and it doesn't matter. If I'm there in the experience, it tends to have a sense of meaning and fullness, and it tends to be a way that I feel the value and preciousness of my life. I think the three ultimately is about how we find the meaning and value of our lives. It's a lifelong lesson for everybody.
And so to that point, a meditation here at point 3 that would be good for all of us to consider.
I think that threes benefit themselves by anything that they do that allows them to be in a kind of state of simplicity. I think that anything they do for their own kind of inner nurturing of that sense of their heart and their conduct is good. But I think the three in all of us, a nice practice is just when we're doing anything, to have the practice of feeling the sense of contact with what we're doing. Sometimes that entails slowing down a little bit or speeding up a little bit, depending on our personality style, and to sort of move in a way that I feel inhabiting the doing. That's a little trickier when we're doing mental work, but it's still possible. But that sense of being with what we're doing is an enormous thing. And it also helps from the point of view that if our meditation is just something we do and then we get off the cushion and turn into a maniac again, what good is that? It's being able to take the consciousness that we cultivate in our practice out into the world, into the way we live and the tasks that we're doing.
All right, type 4. How would somebody know if their personality is a type 4 personality?
Oh, my goodness. Well, type 4 is a type that's very focused on the question of identity. Who am I really? And really, anyone on the spiritual journey, we're going to guess that they have at least some of that going on. But fours are looking really into their emotions, into the life of the heart, trying to get a sense of who I am by how I respond to things, what touches me and doesn't touch me, what do I react to. Fours are very expressive people. They are one of the more emotional types. They value depth, they value intimacy, and boy, do they value beauty, the sense of aesthetics, the life of aesthetics. Uh, that isn't to say that all fours would be artists. I think all fours would probably like to be artists if they had their choice. But there's a sense of living life with a kind of artistic orientation, surrounding oneself with beauty, expressing oneself beautifully, and staying close to the life of the heart is what fours really value.
And specifically for somebody with a type 4 personality, when they're working with the Enneagram, what might help them to live a beautiful life?
Well, fours' problem is that a tendency toward getting hung up on self-analysis, self-involvement, going over and over my old stories, getting caught up in certain cycles of feelings, certain images in my mind, and getting mired down in that. And that can go on to the point of becoming depressed, actually. Any of the types can be depressed, but fours are particularly vulnerable to it. I think what helps fours is movement and physicality and engagement in the world, getting out of the shuttered room, getting some finding beauty not just in my favorite colors, not in my just in my favorite music, not only in that beautiful poetry. Not these are all wonderful things, but seeing the beauty in the mundane world, seeing the beauty of the people at the supermarket, seeing the beauty of the row of houses across the street. There's a way of engaging the world and seeing the beauty in the living moment, as opposed to using beauty and certain memories or images to sort of pull me out of the moment, as if into some kind of reverie. Um, that movement toward a dynamic engagement with the world and finding beauty and life and richness in that is, I think, the right direction for the force.
It strikes me here at type 4, often people who have a personality of type 4, they do stand out. They like to stand out. They are special in a sense. Unique, yeah, there's a uniqueness, but somehow that uniqueness and that drive for a specialness is, as lovely as that is, in a way, that's where the melancholy rests. That's where the sadness rests, because if we try to be unique for the sake of uniqueness, it's almost like we've separated out from creation. And somehow it strikes me at this point that there's a growth where, instead of trying to look at beauty as being something special in one or two things, it's trying to find the beauty in everything.
Exactly. That's precisely what I was pointing to. And that sense of, the more I'm overemphasizing the sense of being special or different or unique, the harder it is to feel connected with people or the world. And just as you're saying, it tends to isolate me. I think fours value relationship and relatedness very much, but in that drive, the drive to become unique, when it's ungrounded, becomes also a feeling and a sense of not being seen, not understood, not appreciated, that tends to lead one round and round in circles. And fours will certainly know what that is if they are indeed fours.
It seems like it's a great challenge here in the personality to be able to balance the relationship with uniqueness with also the relationship with intimacy. I mean, if we were so
Yes.
unique, we wouldn't be intimate with anybody.
Right.
But somehow we want to find a uniqueness that allows us to be intimate with people too.
Yes. I think what fours kind of grow into is treasuring the uniqueness of others too.
Mm.
If I'm sort of hung up on needing to be unique, I need to be more unique than other people. Well, that's it. You look at that head on, it's a pretty painful way of being. But if I'm aware of the uniqueness of the other person, and we're both that, then there's, again, that yields this intimacy that you were just talking about. And there's a way of meeting people, being with people, letting in the richness that other people might be offering too. Um, and just, again, it just weaves us right back to the sense of finding beauty in a much broader spectrum of experiences.
Mm. And perhaps that's the meditation here at point 4, is to be able to witness and recognize the the universal beauty that is expressing itself in so many unique ways.
Absolutely. In every moment, really, if we're looking deeply enough.
All right, let's go to the third triad and
Yes.
to type 5.
Well, again, this is one I know something about, as I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, although I don't think I said I was a 5. I was giving clues to anyone who would know the Enneagram. Um, Yeah, five is the first of the three head types, or head center, intellectual center, thinking center. Fives are people who, above all, value insight, discovery, um, recognizing truth, observing how things are, and discovering things about the nature of reality. And that could be both the what appears as the outer reality or the inner reality. So a lot of discoverers, scientists, kind of avant-garde or cutting-edge kind of artists, people who are trying to look at the world and see through the appearances to something more fundamental. Fives tend to be rather austere emotionally. It's not that they don't have emotions, they just don't particularly want to talk about them or share them. In contrast with the fours, fours love to talk about feelings, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. Fives, we would like to talk about what we see, what we think about things, how what we're observing about the world, but it's difficult for the five to kind of open up and share him or herself with other people. Um, Fives try to reduce their personal role in events and just bring this kind of intellectual curiosity in a pure way. But it doesn't really work because without the kinesthetic part, without the sense of contact, without the sense of kind of a heartful participation in what I'm looking at, what I'm engaged with, the real power of knowingness, what the Greeks called gnosis, the real power of understanding is greatly diminished. We end up just remembering or memorizing a lot of things and repeating what we've learned that way as knowledge. That's not the same thing as really the power of understanding something in the here and now.
Okay, so how might somebody with a type 5 personality benefit from really investigating the Enneagram more?
Type 5, as well, with some of the clues I gave about myself at the beginning. For type 5, it's all about contact. And I always tell my fellow fives, without contact, we can't really know in the way that we want to. We can't know anything in a satisfying way. And if we look back at all of the big eurekas and ahas we've had, there were moments in which, for whatever reason, we were relaxed enough to be feeling some kind of contact. So the journey of the five is to restore the sense of contact and participation. The personality of five tends to withdraw and disconnect and stay rather isolated, either literally or symbolically. But that sense of rejoining the human family, reconnecting with people, but most of all, reconnecting with the sense of myself is really the journey.
And how about a meditation at point 5 for all of us?
I think any practice that we do that yields or unfolds new understanding about ourselves, that helps us see ourselves in a new way, well, that's a good five practice. I think there are just simple, fun exercises that we can do anytime you ask a question. One of my mentors is a man named A.H. Almas, and he says that a question is the most sincere form of prayer. That when we have a sincere question to the universe, we really want to know something about our journey, our heart, the true nature of reality. It's like asking God to reveal God's self. That in itself, that practice of inquiry into reality, is the five in all of us.
Mm. And it sounds to me like what you're saying is that when we sit with that question, we don't just bring our intellect to that question. We like Rilke said, we live the question. So we bring that question into our relationships and into our day and let life help us with the question.
Yes, Rilke's a great example. I don't know 100% whether he was a four or a five. He was right on the border, but I like to claim him for the fives. And he certainly was talking about that as a way of life, inquiring into things with your full heart, your full body, presencing into it, and with this kind of receptive curiosity about reality is so powerful.
Thank you. All right. Point 6, type 6. How might somebody know if they have a type 6 personality?
Well, type 6, they're going to have the hardest time because there's one is that 6s always want to make sure they've got it right. And so they tend to think about things a lot. But also 6s maybe have the widest range of possible behaviors. And there's a lot of 6s about polarity. So there's a way that 6s are very bold on one hand and very kind of shy or even timid in another way. 6s can be leaders, they can be followers, they're free thinkers, they can be conservative. They're kind of really highlight the complexity of a human being. Overall, what we can see is a big theme, though, is 6s want to know what they're standing in, what they're standing on, if you will, and where they're going. And they want to know what they can trust in life. What they really are seeking is a kind of trust in themselves, a trust in an inner wisdom that can guide them toward a full life and the life that they're meant to live. But when they're not quite grounded in themselves, they're always looking at all the different angles of what if I do this, this could happen, but if I do that, that could happen. And oh my gosh, what if this? And my father would have said that, but my priest says this. And they tend to go around in circles with, maybe overthinking an important choice. Some things they can decide quite easily, but big life questions, things that are important to me, I tend to get myself going around in circles with thinking about the different possibilities about it and not quite landing. And that results in a lot of anxiety. That 6s are a type that will feel a lot of anxiety, or what the Germans call Angst, in life. That doesn't stop them from doing the best job they can. They're very responsible people, a bit like the 1s. They care very much about doing a good job, but they do so over this backdrop of kind of self-doubt and anxiety that they're trying to resolve in this process of trying to find that inner knowing that actually we all have.
And so for somebody with a type 6 personality, if they were working with the Enneagram, how might they benefit from working with the Enneagram?
Well, 6s benefit by learning to trust their own inner silence, their own inner stillness. Our ego, our personality doesn't even know what that is. And if it notices it at all, it tends to think it's kind of scary. Like, ooh, what's that like? It seems to suggest if I get too quiet inside, I won't know how to respond or what to do or how to handle things. But actually, it's in that deep stillness, that quiet in our mind, that we get all our best ideas. And it's from that we spontaneously know how best to respond to the situations of life. So I'd say the journey of the 6 is a kind of grounded appreciation and deepening of that inner stillness from which the real guidance in life arises.
And there seems to be something here about how, actually, as you say, when we really sink back into ourselves, we become aware of that essential self that actually trusts us. It really trusts us to know how to live somehow. It's not a trust that has to be developed or acquired from some external source. Strangely enough, we arrived with this element of self-trust. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think any real spiritual teacher is trying to help people find that in themselves. Spiritual teachers offer information or guidance, but really it's pointing to that place in an individual where they already know these deeper truths. And that's why when we discover these things, when we hear a teacher say something, it's not like some alien expression. Something in us recognizes that, yes, I knew that all along. And that person just put it in a way that I can own it and touch it. So it's true, on one level, we get by with a little help from our friends, and that's normal and natural. But those friends are also helping us find and trust that wisdom inside us. And that's the 6 in all of us, really.
Beautiful. And so a meditation at point 6 that we could all benefit from.
Anything that helps us quiet our minds. Now, the thing is, you can't just say stop thinking because that's a thought. That's not going to do much good. And the idea isn't even to stop thinking, it's more to find the spaciousness that is around or behind our thoughts. And we do that through grounding in our bodies and hearts. The more kinesthetically aware we are, the easier it is to find that quiet. But to really find those places in us that embrace that stillness. And the last thing I'll say is that for sixes and really for everybody, the more we find that quiet inside, the more it gives us the courage to step into whatever life is asking of us. That stillness brings an incredible peace that gives us the ability to do what we're here to do.
Thank you. So, finally, and we're getting to point 7. You might say it takes a lot of patience for the person at point 7 to have to wait this long for us to look at type 7.
Oh, I know. It's so difficult for them too.
So let's talk about type 7 personalities and how might you know if you're a type 7 personality?
Sevens are high energy people. They're explorers of the world. They're people who love to sample different experiences, travel, try new things, try new food, meet different people. The sevens, no doubt, coined the expression variety is the spice of life, right? So they're people who take life full on, very curious, very open, and particularly, as I'm saying, open to experiences. They tend to take, as best they can, take life lightly. That doesn't save them from sadness and troubles, but their philosophy is to take a lighter attitude to life, to not take things so seriously. There are things that are serious, but we tend to do better at them when we maintain a sense of positivity and joy and forward movement. So that's lovely, and most people like that. Sevens tend to be popular people for those reasons. Their difficulty is that that very philosophy, that very positive attitude can become, what shall I say, shadow averse. And sevens tend to hide away their difficulties. They hide them from other people, don't necessarily want people to know that they're having a tough time, but they can even hide them from themselves in a certain sense. And when I've done that for a long time, it's like I've got a backlog of difficulties stored somewhere in my psyche. And then it's like trying to get back in touch with that seems like it's going to be too much. It's going to be overwhelming. And then my positive forward moving attitude instead becomes a kind of flight from myself. And I'm still talking the language of positivity, but in fact, I'm a very anxious person who's just escaping from myself. Now, obviously, people do that through entertainment, through working all the time, through distracting themselves in different ways. Heck, we can even do this with spirituality as a way of not really dealing with our deeper, challenging issues. But the 7, once I get on the run, I will often exhaust myself, exhaust my finances, exhaust my friends, and sooner or later, I get exhausted to the point that I have to confront these difficulties.
I'm coaching someone at the moment, Russ, who's got a personality at point 7, and she said something which I thought was so insightful. She just said, I'm tired of being so positive. I feel like I want to become more honest than that. And in that process, we arrived at a whole other level of positivity that wasn't trying to deny or shut out the negatives, if that makes sense, And she also said something at one point. She said, I'm tired of being a smiley face in the world. I don't want to smile this much. It's exhausting. I would much rather find a joy in me that allows me just to be who I really am. And she had so many of these amazing insights and awarenesses, which I think is such a feature of point 7, by the way. These are very insightful people.
I find that absolutely to be true, that I find sevens are much deeper than they let on when they're doing the job cheering everybody up. I mean, it's lovely that they cheer everyone up. But as your client was saying, that gets exhausting after a bit. And it tempts people to think that that I don't have the kind of depth that I actually do. And that hurts my feelings, right? It's painful to be thought of as just the one who goes cheering everybody up, right? And again, when we're sitting in ourselves in that deeper place and we're willing to feel the difficulties as well, we find a deeper source of joy. We find a deeper source of freedom in ourselves. When we're trying to avoid anything, we can't be very free. We're trying to stay away from our sadness, we can't be very free. But when we embrace the totality of our experience, it tends to bring forth what I call a causeless joy. I've compared it to the way that sunlight is always shining, even on a cloudy day. If you fly up in an airplane above the clouds, there it is. And there's a deeper quality of our consciousness that is always positive, but it doesn't entail, as you were just saying, maintaining this positive mood that thinks that being sad or having difficulties will take that away. The real happiness is not diminished by the presence of these other kinds of emotions.
So somebody with a type 7 personality, how would they benefit from working with the Enneagram?
Well, I think noticing their impatience, which is their worst enemy, not just with other people, but with themselves, with their own creative process, with their own healing process, breathing, letting the things slow down a bit, and not pushing oneself along, taking one's time. That doesn't mean going at a sluggish pace, but it means going a bit slower than I'm used to. And letting things register. The way I put this positively for sevens is it's learning to savor the moment, not just be riding it into the next thing, but to taste each moment, which brings a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation, which is the seven's natural state.
And how about a meditation at point 7 for all of us?
That's easy. Gratitude. Anything that is a genuine thank you, a genuine sense of gratitude for our lives, for our existence, for the journey we're on, for the beings that we're blessed to have come into our lives for a while. That sense, I've never met a person who I would see as awake or present or in some sense enlightened that did not have a tremendous amount of gratitude. So anything and everything we do that we can feel thankful for is definitely going to open up the 7 capacity in us.
Russ, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Robert. It was a lot of fun. I'm very touched. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this 2013 Hay House World Summit interview. We hope that you found it inspirational, uplifting, and educational. This is a global event, and we're glad that you could join us as we make the world a little smaller.